gonna make you a world with these two hands today. Put a love, memories and laughs in all that I create.
My bathroom countertop was in bad shape. Pricey granite was out of the budget, and the odd dimensions would require a custom order for laminate. So after doing some research, I decided to paint and refinish my current countertop. I'll show you how to achieve this super polished and durable finish on your laminate counters. This project cost me about $55 total, which was less than half of what a new countertop would have cost me. Here's a list of the necessary supplies along with how much they cost. First, you'll need to remove the sink. This is important because if the sink was sealed to the epoxy, you'd have to crack the epoxy to replace the sink should it need repairs in the future. Begin by turning off the water valves under the sink. Use a crescent wrench to unscrew the pipes above the valve. Score the caulk around the sink and remove. I'm taking off the cheap laminate backsplash since it's in poor condition. I replaced it with 1x4 wooden boards screwed into the studs. It will be finished to blend into the countertop. You'll want to cover the cupboards and adjacent walls with painter's tape and newspaper. Cover the interior of the sink opening as well. The epoxy will drip and you don't want it to end up on your cupboards or floors. You'll need a primer paint. Check the label to be sure that it works on plastics or laminate. Ask them to tint it darker at the store if you're doing a dark countertop like mine. Pick up a few paint stirring sticks as well. Use a foam brush to apply the primer to the counter and backsplash. Don't forget the sides of the counter as well. Allow to dry for 1 hour or the amount of time indicated on the label. Then add a second coat and allow to dry. Now I'll add the base coat. I'm using a specialty paint by Stewart that can be purchased at Home Depot. It's called Textured Metallic in Lampblack. It's a very thick paint with fine glitter. It has a sandy texture. It's a little too thick to go on smoothly, so I'm blending it with black acrylic paint. Combine about 1/3 of the Lampblack paint and a 2-ounce bottle of acrylic paint in a resealable, disposable plastic bowl. Paint the countertop using a foam brush. Remember the backsplash and sides. 1 coat should be sufficient. While the paint is still wet, add a dusting of fine glitter in dark brown. I purchased this little package at the dollar store and only needed half of it. You probably won't be able to see it on your counter right now, but once the epoxy is poured, the glitter will catch the light. Next, I'm adding a few specks of copper leafing. Leaf is a very thin sheet of real metal, and it also comes in silver and in gold. It can be purchased at craft stores. I'm only using a tiny corner of 1 sheet. Use tweezers to tear off very tiny pieces, the size of a grain of rice or smaller. Place it in the wet paint. Go easy on this. I probably only used a dozen pieces for the entire countertop. But it has a big impact and makes the counter look more like natural stone. Once the black coat has dried, you can add the accent color. When I originally did this, I added a brown, cream, copper, and charcoal. It looked nice when I painted it, but the epoxy greatly increased the contrast of the colors, and it wasn't subtle enough for my taste. So I started over and was happy with the second finish. To achieve this look, use a small piece of natural sea sponge to add Martha Stewart cast bronze metallic paint to the countertop. Rotate the sponge so the paint doesn't look uniform. Once it's dry, you can go back over some of the areas that are too bold with the sponge dipped in the black paint. As you're sponging, remember that the epoxy will intensify the colors. I'm using an epoxy product called Envirotex Light. You may remember it from some of my jewelry making tutorials. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to read all of the enclosed instructions. This product will give you beautiful results if it's done properly, but if you don't follow the directions, you can end up with soft spots, bubbles, or discoloration. I'm using a 32-ounce kit for my counter. It's extremely important that when you mix the two parts together, you add exactly equal amounts of each liquid. Since I'm using the entire kit, I can just pour in both bottles. If you're using less, you'll need to measure precisely. Mix the liquids in a disposable container with a flat bottom and sides. It needs to be at least 50% larger than the volume of the liquid you're mixing. A plastic pitcher from the dollar store is perfect for this. Stir vigorously with a wooden paint stick. Scrape the sides and bottom continuously. You will need to whip the mixture for at least 2 minutes. Tilting the pitcher as you stir will help to distribute the liquid for more thorough mixing. Don't skimp on the stirring. Your project will not set properly if you do. As you stir, you should see bubbles forming in the mixture. Some may even float up. Bubbles are desirable, and they mean you're doing a good job. Once you've stirred very well, you should pour the mixture immediately. Flood the countertop with the epoxy. Spread it using a foam brush or paint stick. Use a foam brush to coat the backsplash and sides. Be prepared to watch your counter for the next 30 minutes or so. The epoxy will drip off the sides, so you need to occasionally wipe the drips with the foam brush. Small bubbles will form along the surface. The manufacturer recommends blowing on these, or using a blowtorch to pop them, as carbon dioxide dissolves the bubbles. However, I've always preferred to use a barbecue lighter for this. The epoxy is not flammable, however, your newspaper is, so use caution. Hold the flame close to the surface, but not touching it. Wave the lighter back and forth to pop the bubbles. Do not hold the flame in one place, keep it moving. After about 30 minutes, the epoxy will have thickened enough so that new bubbles won't form. Drips will be less frequent, but check on it every half hour or so. After about 3 hours, check the status of the epoxy by touching the underside of the counter with your fingertip. It should be sticky and somewhat gummy. This is the perfect time to remove the newspaper and tape. If you do it sooner, the epoxy will spread and drip. If you wait too long, it will harden and you won't be able to remove the paper. Peel off the tape, being careful not to accidentally touch the surface of the countertop. Now you need to leave the counter alone. Do not put a fan on it, as this can blow dust into the surface. Lock the door if possible so that it remains undisturbed. It should harden to the touch within 8 hours and be ready for use in 72. For more photos, tips, and frequently asked questions about refinishing laminate countertops, please visit my website at madebymarzipan.com.
Try this at home.